Hello, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the PA Political Digest podcast. I'm your host and guide, Christopher Nicholas. I'm delighted today to welcome Betsy Fischer Martin to the pod. She is the director of the American University's Women and Politics Institute there in Washington, D.C. We are both grads of American University, and luckily for the students, only Betsy teaches there. I do not, so that's good. Welcome, Betsy. How are you today?
I'm great. Go Eagles. Nice to be here with a fellow AU alum.
Exactly. So, um, given your background and expertise in running the Women in
Yeah.
Politics Institute, I thought it would be helpful to my readers and followers if we talked about the ups and downs, the trials and tribulations of women running for office, specifically top offices. Pennsylvania, here we have the governor's race. We have an incumbent male Democrat being challenged by a female state office holder. Last year, we had a couple big gubernatorial races where women ran and won in New Jersey and Virginia. And here in Pennsylvania, some background for everyone. We have never elected a woman as governor or senator. Democrats have never nominated a woman for governor. Pennsylvania, this is the second time Republicans have nominated a woman, and Republicans have never nominated a woman for Senate. The Democrats did that back in 1992, the air quote year of the woman, when the late Yin Yekel ran against my client and boss, Arlen Specter. And that was the only time Specter, by the way, won re-election in a general election with under 50% of the vote. In 1990, Republican Auditor General Barbara Hafer was our nominee for governor, and she got smoked by old man Casey, Bob Casey Sr. So 90 and 92, those were both a long time ago. And here we are now with Republican Treasurer Stacey Garrity now challenging incumbent Governor Josh Shapiro. So my first question after that is, have you noticed, is it getting any easier for women running for top political office? Getting harder? No change? What do you think?
I think it is. I mean, we've definitely seen progress, right? I mean, you mentioned 92 and the year of Lynn Yackel and the year of the woman, right? I remember, I'm old enough to remember that. I was just kind of starting out my career at that time and having just graduated from AU and studied politics and ended up going into journalism first. But I mean, that year the woman was something else. And I remember specifically, there's a quote I had from Dianne Feinstein that I had on my bulletin board at NBC, and that I still have on my bulletin board from then, where she said 2% may be good for fat and milk content, but it's bad for women in the US Senate. So, I mean, that was sort of coming of age for me in terms of awareness about women in politics and that we had a long way to go. And yeah, we got up to 6 women in the Senate, after that year of the woman. And, now we have 26. So this is good. 124 women in the House, and we're a record high of governors of 14. So there has been progress. You asked if it's easier. I think we're more aware of, some of the challenges, and we can be a little bit more proactive on, how to get, I mean, the mission of the institute that I run is really to close that gender gap in political leadership. And so we do a lot of work in terms of educating young women. We also run a campaign training program called We Lead that really helps to work with young women who want to run for office and like do the soup to nuts campaign training, but also kind of outline what some of those challenges are and really how to overcome those in a smart way.
It's been said for a long time now that I forget the exact statistic, but you need to ask a woman three, four, five times to run
Yeah.
before she says yes. And a man is like, you get halfway through the first time and they're like, sure, yeah, let's
Yeah,
go.
of course.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean the same thing, the same thing is can be said in business, It's like women will only apply for a job if they think they meet, 75, 80% of the qualifications, but men is like, watch out, I only meet 10% of the qualifications, but sure, I'm going to go for the job, right? And so it's a similar thing, which is why, we find that yes, encouraging women to run and then also equipping them with sort of the tools because it can be kind of a confidence thing as well. And that encouragement is definitely needed.
I forgot this when I did your intro, but you were a
Yeah.
longtime executive producer of Meet the Press with Tim Russert, and also the main person in charge of NBC's political programming for a long time. So you're a veteran of those wars as well. Is it easier now to get women to run? Let's put aside winning. Uh,
Yeah.
is it easier now because women can now look around? So here in Pennsylvania, I've been working mostly here since 1990. Overall, been working in politics since the mid 80s. And I did the stats yesterday. About 38% of our General Assembly, House and Senate, are
Hmm.
now women, and that's way more than it used to be.
Yeah, definitely there's been, immense improvement and, easier can kind of be relative. Yes, we have more women in office. And, one of the things that is definitely important, and we did a program about this last year, a new book called See Jane Run, which is how the multiplier effect and sort of the role modeling effect of having more women in office does encourage more women to run. If you can only be what you see, right? And so when you're 6 years old and you're looking at that placemat in front of you of all the US presidents, and there's no women on there, as a young girl you're kind of conditioned, or even as a young boy, to think, oh well, women don't belong on this placemat, right? And so it goes a long way to think about, yes, the numbers have definitely gotten better, but there's still challenges. And I think, especially when we're talking about this governor's race and we talk about president, but those are sort of, those higher offices, the executive offices. And I would say that there is a difference there in terms of the barriers that exist in women running for those kind of executive positions. Um, Different from what we see in sort of the legislative positions, because naturally women are seen to be more bipartisan, to get along better with others, to find compromise, like all of those kind of qualities that really you do want in most of the cases in a legislative body. But
Seen as
when
more collaborative, right?
Yes, of course. But when you get into, some of the issues around an executive office, are they tough enough? Can they handle a crisis? We do a lot of work with the Barbara Lee Family Foundation, and we have had a partnership with them that we still continue, called Gender on the Ballot, and they've done some incredible research, Barbara Lee Family Foundation, about women running for those executive offices. They want to see women that can handle a crisis. They want to get results, and is she kind of fully ready for that executive leadership? And that means that the women candidates are often evaluated through a much more demanding leadership lens, if you will. So,
Yeah.
women running for those kind of offices have to show that they're qualified, they're strong, they're ready to lead. And they also have to kind of navigate those expectations, right, around, are they likable enough, right? Men get some more room on that. And so the higher the office, the more that balance really does get tested.
So there's still this focus. I know in real life this is true, but I mean, men get to wear the same uniform every day.
Yeah.
I do TV show here every week called This Week in Pennsylvania. It's the only statewide show on PA politics. And I purposely wear the same thing every week, a blue blazer and a shirt. My Democratic colleagues are women, and of course, there's just a much more focus on fashion and appearance for women than men. And I've always thought that is a little overwrought, but it's very human. So, again, a guy on the campaign trail, do I do like this or do I put a tie on? For women, there's 25 more considerations.
And it's not only more considerations, but something that is super valuable in our lives, the word time. So I can bet I spent more time getting ready for your podcast, Chris, in terms of like making sure I was presentable here than you did, right? And
Oh
so,
yeah,
there is that issue of time that it takes women to like sit in, we always called it NBC HMU, hair and makeup, right?
yeah.
To get to think about these things and to get ready. And like, time is a very valuable asset in all of our lives. So there's not just the consideration in being judged, but actually, having to kind of put the time into to getting ready for things. But still, even to this day, I think this has dissipated, but we certainly see our fair amount of coverage of scrutinizing what a female is wearing to something, even if it's not a negative. It's just, all of a sudden it's mentioned. And it's like, well, if you wouldn't mention that about a male candidate, why are you mentioning it about a female candidate? And so I think the media has gotten a little bit better about that, but I think it still exists.
When I read an interview of a female candidate and the first, the lead paragraph or the second paragraph describes her outfit,
Yeah.
I don't have to see who wrote the story. I'm pretty sure it's a woman who wrote that story because a guy wouldn't walk in and notice a lot of that or even think it was that important. But we're all content creators today. Look at this. So
Yeah.
people are on screens and in front of cameras even more so than normal.
Yeah. I don't know about the bylines. This could make an interesting research project for somebody to go back and look at those bylines. But yeah, it certainly still exists.
So here in Pennsylvania, to give you an idea of one step forward and maybe one step back,
Yeah.
we've had four special elections this month. We're taping this towards the very end of March,
Yeah.
Women's History Month. We had four special elections for the state house. The two Democrat held ones, the winners were two Democratic women. The two Republican held ones were won by two Republican women. So we've inched up a little bit in that, but then uh, just recently a female state rep in Pittsburgh who had announced she wasn't going to run this year,
Oh, yeah.
announced she's resigning here at the end of March because of child care pressures. I think her child is transitioning from pre-K, K into like the grades. I think that's where it is. And she was like, it was a juggle with the time, as you said. So I thought about this as I was prepping for this. We have more female state reps now with all those specials going to women, and now you take a step backward because this woman in her second term, I guess,
Yeah.
from out west, couldn't handle the juggling of the time.
Yeah, and her name is Stephanie Shalava, and it's an
Yeah.
interesting case because it is kind of a reminder that the caregiving demands of office really do shape who serves and for how long they serve, right? And as you mentioned, she's stepping down to care for her family. But what I thought was interesting about that is she just addressed it right off of the bat in her speech, and she said, if you're a mom or a dad who doesn't want your parenting and your public service to live in two separate spaces, a dedicated children's environment within reach would close the gap in real ways. And, this is a time to have a family affirming state capital. And it's interesting because she raised that point, and in a lot of the coverage I saw, that was kind of buried in it. And a lot of the comments, again, like we could talk about vitriol online, but a lot of the
Oh,
comments about it were dogging her for the expense incurred for having a special election, rather than maybe pointing out, hey, maybe we should think about having childcare in the state capital, and maybe it would be a good thing. So it's, there's an organization, in case any of your listeners are interested, called Vote Mama, that focuses on this very topic about electing, women who are mothers. And it has worked on, for example, in campaigning, having legislation where you can spend campaign funds for childcare, and getting and working on that. And they point out that 85% of American women are mothers by the time they're 45 years old. And moms of minor kids only made up 5% of state legislatures around. And so we're losing talent, I think. This is my opinion, if we're not addressing kind of those structural barriers that exist out there. And this legislature, she's an exceptionally talented person. This is the kind of person we would want in a state legislature. She's an attorney. She has worked in cybersecurity and data privacy, right? Got a law degree at home at University of Pittsburgh. She was on this artificial AI task force. Like, this is the kind of person, regardless of your party, that could contribute in a meaningful way to a legislative body. And she has found that it's just not possible. So I think there's an issue there.
I've noticed over the years when people would note or complain the lack of women in the legislature, I
Yeah.
always push back, not because I thought that was an issue, it is, but when you look at the next level of government, county government, it's to me a majority women when you look at county commissioners and registers of wills and all that sort of stuff. And to me, the key difference is if you're a legislator in Pittsburgh, you got to come to Harrisburg a couple days a week for half the year. If you're the Register of Wills in Butler County, you only have to drive to the town of Butler. There's no commuting issue, so
Exactly.
it's easier to juggle motherhood, family, home, and the job. So, and then the difficulty is getting those people to go up to the next level, right?
Yes.
To go from school board or township supervisor or register of wills, to use my example, then get up to the next one that requires travel until their kids are perhaps, you know, out of the nest or mostly out of the nest.
Yeah, and I mean, we see this in Congress too, especially with lawmakers who are, from states that it's just not an easy train ride or flight back home. It's like, how do you do that? And, women that have done it, they'll obviously move their families to DC a lot of the time. But it's a difficult thing. And if we value having, these women part of legislative bodies, there's things that we, collectively can do to help make it more accessible. And like, she was pointing out, having a childcare in the Capitol could go a long way.
So let's shift now to talk maybe about some of the financial uh, reasons maybe
Yeah.
why as many women don't run as they should. And I'm not talking about necessarily the pay of the office,
Yeah.
talking about fundraising.
Sure.
There are certainly some areas of this state and other parts of the world where you don't have to raise a lot of money to win a seat because it's so Republican or so Democrat. Once you get past the endorsement or caucus procedure, you're okay. But
Yeah.
the places that decide majorities are not like that. You have to raise money, you have to spend money. To raise money, you need to ask for it.
Yep.
I have found over the years that it is easier to get men to get up the gumption to go ask strangers to fund their campaigns than it is for women. Have you noticed that as well? Is that changing at all these days?
I think it's getting better. Certainly, are organizations that have come in that realize this issue. I'm thinking on the left of Emily's list, of course, who recognized that this was a problem and has tried early money is like yeast, right, as their acronym, and tried to help with some of that fundraising and alleviate some of that and fund some of these candidates. And there's organizations on the right as well that do that. But and I can just say anecdotally, in our campaign training program that we spend an entire session on this on this very topic, right? Of like effective ways to fundraise. And I think it's definitely more difficult for women to, and nobody likes to do it. It's just, but it's a fact of life when you're running for office. And so one of the things that we found in sort of our training that is helpful way to think about it is to change the perspective from like support me, because women don't like asking money for themselves, versus like support what I'm representing. Like, I'm asking for a contribution to my campaign for what I'm doing, as opposed to just giving to me. And so like flipping that mindset a little bit helps women, but it's still an uncomfortable situation, and it's super important to be able to do.
It doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal, but I agree with you that it is. Something I've done with when I'm working with female candidates is
Okay.
I say, don't use the word dollar, use
Yeah.
the word level. Can you come in
Oh,
at the
that's a good one.
500, level?
Level.
And again, you kind of get past that thing. And I've always found it ironic because to me, the vast majority of campaign professionals that do fundraising are women as opposed to men.
Mm,
And I've always been concerned about that because I think sometimes they get shunted into fundraising or uh, communications, comms,
yeah.
rather than being the manager, going into management. So
Yeah.
I've always cautioned young women coming up. Obviously, I know a lot more Republican staffers like that.
Yeah.
If you want to do comms or fundraising, go do it because they're both
Yeah. Yeah.
critical.
Yeah.
But there's no reason you can't be the head honcho and be the campaign
Right.
manager as well.
Why do
You
you
know,
think more women want to go into staff fundraising, but it's less women want to actually do the fundraising as candidates?
well, look, the dynamic is you're still mostly asking men for money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't think it's sexist. It's just the dynamic of, having female fundraising staffers just works better. That's been my experience. There are many talented men who do fundraising too, and men who do comms. But it's maybe because more women go into journalism, and that's kind of where some people go from there to communications or such. But and at the end of the day, you're fundraising people. You either make your numbers or you don't, right? So
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
it,
Exactly.
in communications and management, you can fudge a little bit, but you either raised $100,000 this week or you didn't. So,
Exactly.
let's chat for a minute
Yeah.
specifically about Pennsylvania's race for governor.
Yeah.
I'll put on my Republican political consulting hat now and say that if Stacey Garrity were a Democrat running to be the first female governor in Pennsylvania, you would not hear the end of it. It would be all over the messaging, all over the press. But because she is a woman and a conservative woman, that kind of gets put to the side. So, have you noticed, maybe not specifically about this race, but uh, running a woman running for office in the Democratic Party maybe has some more advantages that women on the Republican side do not? Have you seen that at all?
I think what we have seen and in some of our research that we've done on political opinion, public opinion, we have found that Democrats are more interested in electing women to office. They will say at higher rates that we don't have enough women in elected office and that we need more. And Republicans will pretty much shrug and say, we're fine. We don't need more women in elected office. Like 28% is fine. And so there is that difference that I've just found in the research when you think about, voters and, what they care about, that there is not as much interest within the Republicans who think that gender, like it would be better to have more women in office. They don't see that there is a disparity or they don't care about it. So that's what I know just factually from, polling data.
In Pennsylvania, if you were to take an average 1,000 Republicans across the state,
Mm-hmm.
about 51% of them would be women. If you did that same with Democrats, 1,000 average Democrats across the state, 61% would be women. So their issue agenda skews more female.
Yeah.
More women are interested in those issues, and I think the reason that uh, female voters are more important than Democrats than Republicans is just there's a lot more of them. 60% is more than 51%. And I
And
think that is
yeah,
also
I
what
also,
drives it.
yeah, I think you've probably found, in recent years, talking like pre-Trump, post-Trump, that a lot of women have actually left the Republican Party. And maybe they don't identify as Democrats, maybe they are more independents, but I feel like a lot have actually, left the party or their party left limb, whatever way you want to think about it. As well. But I'm curious in Pennsylvania because it is you mentioned this at the beginning. It is one of the final four that I call it of states that are left to never have elected a female governor or senator. The other three, Colorado, Idaho, and Indiana, I believe. And Virginia, as you know, you mentioned elected. Virginia was part of that club. It was five at the time, and they've now elected Abigail Spanberger. But what is it that you think, and you're the expert on Pennsylvania, not me, what do you think is the reason that Pennsylvania has never elected a woman governor or senator?
We've had women at all other levels. We've
Yeah.
had women
Yeah.
in the House in both parties. The Speaker of the Pennsylvania House is a woman. The President pro tem of our state Senate is a woman. So there's obviously not as much of a glass ceiling there. I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier is there's a lag in getting women involved. I know there's a group in Pennsylvania called the Anstein series, named after our late great party chairwoman Ann Anstein, that does training for women who want to run for office as Republicans.
Oh, that's
And the
good to know.
Democrats have a newer group called Empower PA, I think is what it's called. But we have, probably close to 1,000 graduates of the
Yeah.
Einstein series. And look at these, I think both of the women who just won special elections in the House, the Republicans, are both graduates of that. So it takes a little time until, to use your placemat example,
Yeah.
people can look at a picture of the state House or the state Senate. There are more women Democrats in the House, but there are more women Republicans in the Senate.
Mm.
So they see they see the pictures, right? And
Yeah.
they can
Yeah.
say, oh, look at this. There's
Yeah.
19 women in the Senate and
Yeah.
68-ish in the House. And the other thing is, the last time we ran a woman for governor, Barbara Hafer, she got skunked. I worked for the PA House Republican Campaign Committee then. I did the after action report. She lost 2-1. She lost 197 of the 203 state house districts. And to tell you how long ago that was, the six she won were in Montgomery County and Bucks County.
Wow.
Okay. And that would not be the case
Yeah.
today. And then for the Democrats, the year of the woman, if you were going to
Yeah.
elect a Democratic senator, that was the year to do it
Right.
as it was happening.
It came
And
close.
very close,
Yeah.
49.9 to like
Yeah.
49.6. So
Yeah.
I think both parties had some, I don't know, bad mojo about it.
Yeah.
Um, so, um, but Stacey Garrity to me is a glass ceiling breaker in two fields: in the Army as the MPs, and in her business in the coated powdered metals business and such.
Yeah.
So I like you said, we'll see if voters care about that. In Pennsylvania now, even though, as you rightly pointed out, Trump has pushed some former Republicans out of the party, during his time, the trend of Republicans gaining in voter registration has continued pretty much unabated. So today, as we speak, 42% of the state are Republicans, 42% are Democrats. There's like a 25,000 vote difference among active voters,
Mhm.
among our 8 million plus voters. So it really, what matters here is, what do the independents do?
Yeah.
Because if in these days most R's vote Republican, most D's vote Democrat.
Sure.
So what do those 16% of independents want to do um, in statewide races? Again, it's
Yeah.
different in pockets. So
Yeah.
um, we're thinking it's getting easier to recruit women. We think it's easier for them to raise money now. We think it's easier because they see, you know, the trend is your friend, as we say, and there are more and more women getting elected. So so what's the holdup then? I mean, I think some Democrats are wary because they ran two women for president and they lost to Donald Trump. So do you think that's giving people pause?
I mean, I get this question a lot when it comes to, and you had referenced it a little bit earlier when you talked about, the candidate that got smoked, and it's like, did that set things back? And like, I think that question is certainly out there in terms of when we think about electing a female president. Did Kamala Harris help or hurt the cause, if you will, for that? And I'm not sure, anybody has the answer on that. But I think that, when we're looking at this particular race, one of the things that you mentioned that I think is really interesting, because you mentioned the military background that Stacey Garrity has. And when we think about the two women that were elected in the off years, right? Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger, both of them having military, in Mikey Sherrill's case, national security at CIA, and Spanberger's case, that's a through line that I think is interesting. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about even earlier, is that sort of, are they tough enough question? Can they be in a fight? Can they lead? And I think in Stacey Garrity's case, it's interesting because what she seems to be putting forward, if you go to her website, the very first thing she's talking about in sort of like her intro bio, right, is like, when I enlisted in the military, I took a solemn oath to defend their country and honor her principles. And then flash to, there she is in camouflage getting out of a helicopter, like literally first images on her website. Like, so she's putting that forward. I mean, you're the political strategist here, but like, that to me is a very interesting way to kind of, put that message forward and help her, because it seems to have, been an effective way that we've seen in these last two governor's races.
Kind of chuckle when my Democratic colleagues say, boy, she doesn't know what's coming, running against Josh Shapiro, the juggernaut. And I'm like,
Yeah, yeah.
she was forward deployed 3 times in the Middle East. She ran a prison camp of, desperate people who wanted to do nothing more than kill everybody.
Yeah.
And, she managed that, rose the level of colonel. As she said, she only left because she reached the retirement age in Army Reserves. Otherwise, she'd still be there. And that's why she turned to politics. So I don't know what Josh Shapiro has in store for her. I'm not sure if it's going to really flummox her as compared to what she was doing in uniform and service
It's an
to the
impressive
country.
background for sure.
But you're right. We have a lot of military and retired military here. Pennsylvania
Yeah.
definitely punches above its weight class in terms of military. I've often said here in South Central Pennsylvania, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a retired
Uh-huh.
colonel or something. So I think it's smart of them to emphasize that because that's what you've got, right? I mean, there aren't a lot of female Army Reserve colonels who are in the MPs who got two Bronze Stars out there walking
Incredible, right?
around
Yeah,
running for
sure.
office. And for her, uh, we have three elected what we call statewide row offices: Attorney General, Auditor General, and Treasurer. And just the way they're built, Treasurer gets the least amount of attention of all of those, right? Auditor General, you're pointing out overspending and bad things. Attorney General, you're putting the bad guys away, right? So anytime anybody goes from a row office to governor, you're kind of going from minor league ball to the big leagues. I use that example in honor of baseball being back
Yeah.
now, which is great. Go Phillies! So to wrap up here, if you're a voter in Pennsylvania
Yeah.
and you're thinking about whether this is important to people, what would you stress if you're Stacey Garrity? And are there some things that male candidates running against a woman have to watch out?
Well, on the watch out front, I mean, I think I would say, maybe just to reframe that a little bit, is like whether, you know, male candidates can understand that voters are now, I think, quicker to kind of spot if there's a double standard, right? When you think about, women facing, issues like sexism while campaigning. Um, I think voters support women candidates speaking out, when that does happen, and a calm, confident professional way. I always like to say, the TSA, not to raise TSA in our discussion this week, but like the TSA motto of like, see something, say something, right? I think that if there's a risk for male candidates, it's like, it's not usually one dramatic moment, but it's like the tone. It's like, are you sounding patronizing? Are you talking over the female candidate? Um, that kind of stuff voters are more attuned to. So I think the strongest male candidates in that race, in races, keep the race on the record, the issues, the competing visions, right? And they don't try to let some of this kind of sexism that can seep through, intentionally or not intentionally, surface, because I think that can certainly backfire.
And I will say that a couple times during his first term, Josh Shapiro has had trouble with that, not specifically with Stacey Garrity, but with our president pro tem,
Mm.
Kim Ward. They've gotten into some kerfuffles where I don't think the governor has presented himself the best way that he wants to. But it's again, it's in the eyes of the beholder. You're right. Some people think it's a big deal, and some people um, don't. And I don't know if the people who say it's not a big deal is because they don't want it or because it's become so commonplace these days. I had a friend of mine who is not running for reelection now, but when she first ran for office in 2008, she was going door to door and she got a couple of responses from people along the lines of, "Who's home watching your kids while you're out knocking on my door?"
Yes, yes, yes. Of
A guy would never have gotten that
course not.
that that question. And hopefully are we mostly past that? I'll let you end on a happy note, hopefully, by saying, are we past that, Betsy?
I mean, I can't say we are past it because I think it does still happen, but I think we are at a point where people like you would call that kind of BS out, right? That we would not just let that slide. And so maybe there's progress in that.
There you go. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for being with us. Tell people how they can find the Women and Politics Institute online, Betsy.
Well, thank you. We have a website. If you just hit the Google on Women in Politics Institute at American University, we have a lot of really great programming that we do. We just had a group of female ambassadors to the United States come and do a panel for International Women's Day. That was great. We do a lot of our programming online as well. And so if any of your listeners in Pennsylvania would like to pop into any of our events. And we also have links on our website to the past programs. I mentioned a couple of them here today and the research that we do with Gender on the Ballot. And then I would say most importantly, I'll just put out this call for our campaign training program that we run, we lead. It's for young professional women. So it's not for AU students, it's for the community. And it's kind of our put our money where our mouth is mission. And we offer it free of charge, free, FREE. I have it fully funded. And that's a campaign training program when the participants spend one full Saturday a month with us for an academic year. And we do the soup to nuts campaign training. I bring in top practitioners, and we have a cohort every year of about 30 to 35, and we've got about over 1,500 alums. So I would encourage anybody who is thinking about running for, and it's, by the way, it's nonpartisan. We've got, left, right, and center, all folks represented. And so I would encourage anyone, if you yourself are interested in running for office, or if you know another young woman, you talked about the important encouragement. If there's a young woman, professional woman out there that that would make a great candidate and wants to take the train down to Washington one Saturday a month, we would love to have them.
That is a terrific way to end. I will note that back in the day, AU had something called the Campaign Management Institute.
Yes.
That
We still
was
have that.
during some in the summer. I did it in the January when we were off
Yes.
from school, and that was more for training staffer types
Yes.
as
Yes.
opposed to candidates. But that's one of the things I like about my alma mater is we get in there at the granular level and not so much theory, but real real politics. So
Exactly. Exactly.
thank you for hanging out with us here as we
Sure.
end
My pleasure.
Women's History Month. And thanks again. And if people have an interest in what Betsy was talking about, you can go to the website. I get their email every week, Gender on the Ballot, right?
Yeah,
That's what it's called.
that's good.
And that's always good story ideas and for me. So again, you've been watching the PA Political Digest podcast with Betsy Fischer Martin of AU's Women in Politics Institute. Betsy, thanks again. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Appreciate
Bye
it.
bye.
Bye bye.